The Grim Reaper's always been scary. Throughout history, millions of children have had to reach an age where they become aware of their mortality. We find out our time existing is finite, and wow, there's a scary guy with a scythe that's totally gonna come get us.
And because your parents don't want you to start your goth phase a little too early, they plop you in front of the television to get your mind off stuff.
So, you're tuning in and watching Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, regular show, Adventure Time, and you're seeing that, hey, these cartoons aimed at children have death in them. So you think to yourself,
That's weird. Aren't I supposed to be scared of this guy or what?
or you don't, because you're a kid with like a 10-second attention span. As you get older, though, you continue watching some animated shows, and eventually you make your way over to adult cartoons. You see that the Grim Reaper is still there, but just different. What that difference is, you don't know. It just doesn't feel the same. That's kind of weird, you consider to yourself. But ultimately, you don't think about it too much. After all, some random YouTube video essayist is probably going to do all the thinking for you. First off, we have to consider who the Grim Reaper even is exactly. Deep question, I know.
But in the case of humanity, it kinda matters. Every moment of every day, there are moments that remind us that we are mortal beings. And the Grim Reaper, in that case, is just a representation of the fact that we're not going to be here forever. Since the beginning of time, people have been trying to figure out this whole death thing.
In the past, before the age of cartoons, people would just tell stories and hope those stories would have a takeaway. Fast forward to now, when stories are being written down and shared in a different way. The animated cartoon. The Grim Reaper has always been an antagonistic force given corporeal form. The manifestation could be reasoned with, it could be bartered with, it could be tricked, or it could be challenged. With the advent of visual storytelling, the Grim Reaper didn't have to be this vague form anymore. You could add a spin on it, and thus, boom, cartoon death. It is the year 2000, and a little show called The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy is greenlit after a series of shorts on another show called Grim and Evil. The show reached critical acclaim, and I'm sure somebody else will cover that history. This show centered around the Grim Reaper losing a rigged limbo game and being forced to become friends with Billy and Mandy. The whole show centers around Billy and Mandy taking advantage of Grim, and 6 seasons of hilarity ensues. Grim, in this show, is shown to have flaws. He cares about Billy and Mandy, but he also can't stand them. He is shown to carry on other relationships, he has friends, he's been bullied growing up, and he has and continues to have love interests. Grim is the main character of the series, with Billy and Mandy playing second fiddle. There are episodes that are just about developing Grim and his struggles. And we as the viewer are placed in a position to empathize with Grim and the solutions to the situations he finds himself in. We are literally feeling something for the Grim Reaper that isn't fear, and that's deep AF. But hey, maybe that's a bad place to start. After all, Grim is the main character of the story. Of course they'd have to flush him out over the course of 6 whole seasons. Let's take a look at how death is shown in a more modern show. In Adventure Time, Death is a recurring character that the other characters routinely have to run into and interact with. This version of Death personified carries on relationships with Abraham Lincoln, the former King of Mars, Marceline, and Peppermint Butler. This version of the Grim Reaper is routinely seen and actively takes part of many goings-on anew. He is depicted as a talented musician playing on stage with Marceline during the Battle of the Bands and playing the drums against Finn during a trip to save PB's plant. He's constantly showing up in the background and hanging out with characters, and even has an animated short about him trying to get an anniversary gift for his girlfriend. This is also matched to regular show with its in-universe portrayal of death. The Grim Reaper in the regular show universe has a wife and kid, rides a motorcycle, and only occasionally goes back to the souls of the characters, mainly Muscle Man and Skips. According to Freud, Freud, humans are raised fearing death. This thanatophobia, as it's called according to the Freudster, starts off as a general fear of death, but eventually leads to the fear of deaths of those around us. And part of growing up, as I've mentioned, is learning to deal with those fears and learning how to live in spite of them. The Grim Reaper in both of these shows is represented as a complicated yet lovable character. The people that watch these shows are mostly young children, and they are more willing to accept that something as irrational and as unyielding as the personification of death can have a personality and interests. In stark contrast, that leads us to adult programming.
Here we see the Grim Reaper become as generic as we can get. In shows like Family Guy and The Simpsons, it's really just trying to get you to laugh.
In The Simpsons, for example, you see death mostly in the Treehouse of Horror episodes, during the trial for Homer's soul, and that one time that Homer became the Grim Reaper after killing him with a bowling ball. Here, death is not a character in The Simpsons, despite The Simpsons running for nearly 30 seasons and having in-universe death. The Grim Reaper is a plot device on The Simpsons, compared to Family Guy, on the other hand, which is a step closer but still manages to miss its mark. Love it or hate it, for the most part, Family Guy has always been about making you laugh no matter the cost. The jokes are lowbrow, the references serve as fillers for punchlines sometimes, the show's a hot mess, but in that hot mess we see a change. In Family Guy, the Grim Reaper is a character, albeit a hollow one. The interactions the characters have with death only serves to drive the plot forward, and even the things we learn about the character exist only to try to get a few yucks. Whether it's implying Death did a few porn videos in college, or that he lives with his mother and has trouble talking to women, the closest we get to a moment of development is the date, where a punchline is literally a check please. Classic Family Guy. So then, ultimately, what would you say separates this Grim Adventures Adventure Time regular show from this Simpsons Family Guy?
3 things: character, intent, and the audience.
Adventure Time's intent is to have you connect to the characters and their struggles while building a unique and interesting world. Shows like Family Guy and The Simpsons, on the other hand, tell jokes and wrap up its plots by the end of each episode. But on top of that, the audience it's trying to reach has grown past the fear of death as a ever-presence, and no longer needs to view the Grim Reaper as anything other than a background character with no discernible personality. You can't relate to the Grim Reaper in shows like Family Guy and The Simpsons. You don't have the power to go back in time, you're not immortal, and you don't have the responsibility of reaping souls and taking them to the afterlife. But, however, you might have a connection with overcoming a personal struggle in the face of death, like in shows like Regular Show and Adventure Time. In those depictions, we see the Grim Reaper as an individual with struggles, and if the Grim Reaper has human problems, then we shouldn't be as scared of it as much. In the end, what this all illustrates is really the interesting part. Somewhere along the line, we as children stop seeing death as something we have to interact with and just accept. We stop fearing it because we realize that we can't do anything about it. We learn to make jokes about it, and it becomes less scary. We manage this by making the Grim Reaper a relatable character for kids shows to personify and expand upon, and by making the Grim Reaper a joke for adult shows to mock and use as a punchline. Thank you.